Hello, I'm Eduardo Gonçalves from the Climate Group and welcome to Climate TV. Today we're going to be talking about the forthcoming COP conference on climate, and today to discuss this with me we have Damian Ryan from the Climate Group, who's the Head of International Policy and a veteran of these conferences. Damian, first of all, tell us what's actually going to be happening later this year.
Okay, so Paris is the annual United Nations Climate Change Conference. It's also often referred to as COP21, which stands for the Conference of the Parties, or the 21st Conference of the Parties. So as that name suggests, we've been doing this for over 2 decades now, kicked off in the 1990s. And this particular meeting is an important one because it will see the end of a period of negotiation which is supposed to result in a new global climate deal for addressing climate change from 2020.
So why does this one matter so much? Why are so many people talking about it?
Well, it's because of this culmination of about 3 or 4 years of negotiation. In fact, the negotiation period has been much longer. You could go all the way back to around 2006, when the first talks began on a successor to the Kyoto Protocol, which is the treaty that was signed in 1997 for countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, rich countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, as you can see, these have been ongoing negotiations. We've gone through several phases, and this particular phase began in 2011 in Durban in South Africa. And as I was saying, the last 4 years have been about moving towards a final agreement, which is what everyone is expecting in Paris.
Now, a lot of people will remember what happened in Copenhagen. Do you think there's a risk that we're going to see a repeat of that?
I think it's unlikely. Now, one of the key reasons for that is because most of the negotiators who are going to be in Paris were also in Copenhagen. So they're very aware of the ghosts of Copenhagen sitting on their shoulders, and also very aware of what went wrong and so what needs to go right. In addition to that, I think there's been a lot of changes outside of the process itself. I mean, we've seen a huge fall in the costs of renewable power technologies, for example. So as opposed to Copenhagen, when politicians, I think, ministers and leaders who arrived there were told that a low carbon future was on the horizon. Now they can actually see it in action, and I think that's going to give has given a huge amount of cover for politicians. You're also seeing businesses step up to the plate. So I think that combination of lessons learned from Copenhagen itself, the actual negotiating process, and the changes in the external world mean that there's a much better chance of a deal.
And who are the main actors and groupings that will be taking part in this? Some of them have got interesting names, like the like-minded group of developing countries. I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, as you can kind of understand, the main actors are the usual suspects, the ones that we see in the paper every day for all sorts of reasons, political and economic. So obviously the US, China, EU, but when you get 192, I think it's close to 200 countries together for a negotiation, clearly it's impossible to get everyone around the table and negotiate on that sort of individual country basis. So what's evolved over the years is creation of country groups. And remember, this is a UN process, so a lot of these groups are recognised UN groupings. Very simply though, you can divide countries into 2 groups at a very basic level, which is developed countries and developing countries, so rich and poorer countries. Within the developing country groups, the main one that people will probably hear about is the group of 77 in China. But then that divides into a whole range of other groupings as well. So you have groupings for Africa, for the least developed countries, for small island states, and there's probably at least another 2 or 3. And then on the developed country side, you also have groups. So the EU, or the European, 28 members of the EU negotiate together as a single bloc. There's a grouping called the Umbrella Group, which basically combines all of the non-European OECD countries, so the likes of the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, and a number of others. And then there's a scattering of others. So it's it's a complicated array of groupings.
And then what's the ADP and why is that important, and what's progress is being made through that?
Okay, well I guess the first thing to say is that the UN loves acronyms, so you can't get away from that. So the ADP stands for, get ready for this, the Ad Hoc Working Group on the Durban Platform. So what does that mean? Okay, there is an international architecture for climate change, which sits under the original UN Climate Treaty, which is the UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change. And that was agreed in 1992, came into force in 1994. It established a number of bodies, permanent bodies, and they meet twice a year. So they will be meeting in Paris, and they're called the subsidiary bodies. One looks at implementation and one looks at scientific and technological advice. Now, in addition to that, you also have these countries agreed to establish these ad hoc groups. Now, as the name suggests, they're for dealing with particular issues. So ad hoc groups have been set up over the last 6 or 7 years in order to start these negotiations. So initially there was a ad hoc group for the Kyoto Protocol, for agreeing the next phase of the Kyoto Protocol, and we've seen a number of other groups being established. Now the ADP is the latest iteration of that, and as the name suggests, it came about in Durban, and it has a mandate to deliver a new global agreement on climate change, and its mandate says that it should be agreed by Paris, and that treaty would come into effect from 2020.
So what are the challenges of actually trying to craft an international agreement of this kind and the language that is used in it?
Right, well, I mean, what I was saying before about the fact that you've got 192 countries, I mean, or nearly 200, sorry, that is the complexity, because this isn't a treaty between, for example, countries of similar economic development or technical capability or political capability. We have got the whole world there. So very advanced countries at one end, very poor and developed countries at the other. And so coming up with a treaty which addresses all of those concerns is obviously going to be a difficult process. So you have to balance, and there are a number of sort of key crunchy issues which divide countries. So a particular one, for example, is around the idea of historic responsibility for climate change. And that splits, in very simple terms, developed countries versus developing. And the position of developing countries is that climate change as we've experienced it now, most of the emissions in the atmosphere are from developed countries, and therefore they should take the lead. And indeed, that principle is actually a fundamental part of the original UN Climate Change Treaty, which says that very thing. But the world's moved on. The world has moved on quite a lot from 1992. And you have, in particular, the new emerging economies, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, and a growing number of others. So there are these challenges in coming up with a new treaty that reflects that change in economic development, and that's why it's so hard. And there are a number of other issues as well. So finance is a critical one. Climate finance for supporting developing countries, both adapt to climate change that we're committed to, but also for investing and financing the new low carbon technologies that we all need.
Thank you, Damian. That was Damian Ryan, the International Head of Policy at the Climate Group. That's all from us today. Hope you'll join us again soon. From everyone here at the Climate Group, goodbye.